Hello, I'm Chard deNiord, the former Poet Laureate of Vermont from 2015 to 2020. Had a wonderful time as Poet Laureate of Vermont. Such a rich literary tradition and a poetic tradition in Vermont. I'm very honored to perform the duties, my own duties that I came up with throughout that time of reading and writing. The new Poet Laureate is Mary Ruefle, a wonderful poet who lives in Bennington. I encourage you to read her poems. Her most recent book is a book called Dunce. So you can find that in bookstores. Today I'm very happy to talk with Charles Monette, who is a Vietnam veteran and writer and a playwright and poet. I'm going to just read a little summary of his life and work and then ask him to read a poem. Charles was born in Manhattan, New York on December 10th, Emily Dickinson's birthday in 1950. He went to high school at Dominic's in Oyster Bay, Long Island. After 2 years of college, or rather I think a year of college, he was drafted in the first lottery, number 44, and sent to Vietnam to join C Company 2 and 5th 1st Air Cavalry Division as an infantry grunt. Air mobile. He was wounded in battle, hit with shrapnel from a rocket-propelled grenade. June 15th, 1971, after spending 349 days in Vietnam, almost a year, he was a sergeant. He left Vietnam as a sergeant E5. He can explain that to you. Upon returning, he worked as a printer at Crown Press, Oyster Bay, and went full-time to Nassau Community College at night. He switched to New York Institute of Technology the next semester to study and to become a disc jockey. After running a program where one professor was a drunk and another hardly showed for class, he became disillusioned and headed west in search of America. Many stories along the way. In 1980, he came to Brattleboro, Vermont to work as a carpenter for Brattleboro Design Group, a passive solar design build firm that was just beginning. A few years later, he was on his own as a carpenter, then joined Williams and Freshie as their field foreman in 1987. Upon his arrival in Brattleboro, he became active in community theater. Acting in small roles became larger roles. And in 10 years, he had some leading roles in addition. He became the first president of Vermont Theater Company, VTC. In 1990, his newfound love of acting led him to NYU to pursue a career in theater, New York University. He received his bachelor's degree in May of 1992 and a master's of arts in education theater in 1995. He was 45 years old at the time. He returned to Brattleboro and began teaching at Landmark College. He taught acting in a film course he created, Intro to Communications and Dialogue and Debate, the Art and Logic of Argumentation. Not all at the same time. He also produced and directed the student theater productions in the spring and fall of the academic year. 5 of those plays he wrote. Yeah, he has 2 beautiful children with his lovely ex-wife, Belle Coles. Devon, his oldest son, is 29 and teaches vocational studies at Kindle Farm High School in Newfane. Simone, his daughter, 24, is a bartender at the VFW in Brattleboro who hopes to return to college next fall. He writes for Vermont View, and his poems have appeared in Monkey's Cloak section of his column, Meanderings. So welcome, Charles. It's wonderful to have you here. And I hope you have been doing well. I haven't seen you for a little while, and I'd love to catch up with you and just talk about what you're doing lately, as well as some of the things you've been doing over the past few years. But first, I'd love you to read a poem.
Okay. First, I'd like to say thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
It's an honor. So maybe I'll read the poem first, and then I'll talk a little bit about it.
Okay, maybe I
Or-
could say a few words
Sure.
about it as well. Now,
Sure.
This poem, Charles wrote or submitted to the contest
Right action.
for Right Action, and it was chosen as the first place poem by Tom Regal,
That's
who's
right.
actually appeared on this show as well. So that's the history behind this poem.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, this was the first poem that I ever entered in a contest. So I was totally surprised to win. And this is called Ambiance Bullet Ballet. There's a few terms I want to familiarize you with before, or define before reading the poem. In the Vietnamese language, an, an, equals peace. Bian, bian, equals hidden or secret. Dinky Dao equals crazy. Didi Mao, go quickly. Hien, Hien, gently. Ambiance Bullet Ballet. 7 of us on patrol. Jungle. Vietnam. Voices. Charlie talking. Hear him? Fan out, move, there, dried up stream bed, ambush. I am a bush, can't see me. He's talking and joking on a Sunday stroll. They walk into a moment. We see him first, a moment. He sees us, a moment. His countenance begets fear, a moment. Our M60 machine gunner opens up. I join the fray. His body dances a bullet ballet. Slow motion, slow, arms, legs flailing. Mournful music beats out another story of war. Then down. He drops down. Squad gives chase to a wounded others. I go to the fallen soldier, NVA pay officer. Just us two. Pas de Dieu. Denouement. Still breathing, unconscious, legs splintered open, bent back, bone exposed, blood oozing. No more ballet. Why am I here? Dinky Dao. To say, I'm sorry, as I place my hand, hien, on his forehead. Gone. He's gone. His spirit splits. Didi Mao, just like that, gone. Dinky Dao, did I give the okay? Where's my bullet, my ballet? They're all mine. He danced with grace, precision, and fluidity. I wondered about his ballerina back home.
Powerful poem, Charles. You wrote this many years after you returned, but it seems like you were writing it at the moment almost because of your recall.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a moment that's hard to forget. Someone dying in front of you, and I had fired bullets that might have killed him, helped kill him. I remember that night we slept in hammocks in the jungle, and just crying all night in my hammock. And I saw his face for a long time. And I actually wrote a play about it, Phil October. And just briefly, in that play, just before the ambush, a French waiter drags a table out on stage. And Ambiance comes and sits, and he knows the French waiter, Jacques, because they're French in Vietnam. And then Jacques invites me, Phil October, to join him at the table. And they sit and talk as young men, 20 years old, and talk about how they got here.
Mm.
How did they get to this moment, this point on the earth, on the trail? And so they have this, understanding, and drink some wine, eat a meal, and then it goes back, and then the ambush takes place, and so. Yeah, something I thought a lot about.
Yeah, and it sounds like you still think about.
Sure. Although, it's almost 49 years now since I left, and it takes a long time to come home from Vietnam. And family and friends, and coming to terms, with your physical wounds and your PTSDs and all that. And I've been lucky to have great support along the way from family and friends and even therapists. And but at some point, it's like I just want to let go of that experience. Put it, and
But
I've been letting go of it. And one of the ways to let go of those experiences is to write about it and let go, on the page. It's very cathartic.
I was just going to ask you about that, the cathartic effect of writing about it, finding the language to describe not only what happened, but how it affected you, and how the act of writing itself, finding some meaning or not in this experience, helped you move beyond what you did experience.
Yeah, and with this poem, I didn't want Anbyan to be forgotten on the jungle floor. Mm-hmm. I thought he deserved respect.
So it was a kind of witness too, as a poem. Yeah. And this was someone you knew.
No.
No.
This is just he was North Vietnamese Army.
He was
just walking down the
Arvin.
trail. We were going this way, and he was coming this way.
Okay, I didn't know. Couldn't tell from the poem itself.
No, I didn't know him.
Yeah.
Never knew his name. I just made up the name.
Right. So it reminds me a little bit of the Hardy poem, The Man He Knew. Do you know that poem? And
who again is that?
By Thomas Hardy.
I don't know
about an encounter with the enemy in a similar situation, and how you might have suddenly felt very different in a human way about the other, for lack of a better term, in that encounter, and how that then redounded on just your feelings about the war in general. Mm-hmm. Do you remember? Because you were wounded too.
Yeah, I was wounded at the end of my tour, 11 and a half months. Mm-hmm. And I could have been out of the bush already, because I was offered a rear job, and I was an old guy.
Seems like that's when it always happens sometimes.
But I told my LT, I said, so when am I supposed to get on a helicopter and say, good luck?
Yeah. You didn't want to
and
do
I
that.
was the most experienced guy in the platoon at that time. So.
Yeah. So you make a point in the introduction I just read that you were there for 349 days. Does that mean you were there longer than most people?
Well, here's the way it worked. You had a 1-year deployment, so 12 months, 365 days. Mm-hmm. If you came back from Vietnam with 6 months left in your army, you'd be assigned to a fort to run out those last 6 months.
Right.
If you had less than 6 months, you would you'd be out. You'd be totally out. So you'd roll the dice, and to do that, you'd have to extend for another month to the 13th month. You say you'd have to stay 13 months, which I did. I was going to, or else I would have already been getting processed.
Discharged,
But to extend, because I didn't want to come polish boots on a fort when I came home, and it was,
Yeah. So I'm wondering, it was such a powerful poem. Could you read the last half of it, or pick up at a point where, you come to sort of the main point of that encounter?
Yeah, sure. What did I do with it?
It's on the front, I think. It's
Yeah, well,
I saw you put it back.
I thought I put it back too.
Yeah,
There, it's underneath.
yeah.
How about that? Okay. So, the last half.
Well, wherever you think the you know the kind of the turning point is there between the time you see him and the actual your actual attendance.
Yeah. Well, again, that experience slows down.
Yeah,
And it's over in a flash, but it you can remember.
it slowed down.
It slows down.
And just if you could also repeat those words and their meaning again, the Vietnamese
Sure,
words.
sure. Yeah, and just briefly about language in Vietnam. So you had Vietnamese language, you had French,
Right.
because they had been in country for so long.
Yeah.
And then you had grunt slang,
Right.
which is our own made-up language,
Right.
which was a combination of all three.
Right.
So, for example, dinky dao is crazy.
Yeah.
Beaucoup dinky dao, French. Beaucoup dinky dao is very crazy.
I
So
see,
that's,
I
just
see.
things
I
like
got you,
that.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
we had back in the world was another expression. When we get back in the world, that was always,
Yeah.
we fantasized about how wonderful life was going to be back
Yeah.
in the world.
Okay. And that was called.
That's like a grunt slang.
Okay, just in English. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This is English. Yeah. Well, I'll just go to. They walk into a moment. We see him first. A moment. He sees us. A moment. His countenance begets fear. A moment. Our M60 machine gunner opens up. I join the fray. His body dances a bullet ballet. Slow motion, slow. Arms, legs flailing. And there, we've all seen films, and it's like the bullets take, the body, and that's where my bullet ballet comes in.
I see.
Mournful music beats another story of war, then down. He drops down. The squad, there were 7 of us out on patrol. So we don't know how many of them there were when we heard them talking. And the rest of them ran. They got away. Squad gives chase to a wounded others. I go to the fallen soldier, NVA pay officer. Just us two. Pas d'adieu, dénouement. Dénouement, French, falling action.
It also means, is it denouement?
Yeah.
Like outcome?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And kind of in dramatically, it's like the after the climax.
Yes, right. Untranslatable in many ways.
Yeah. So then I go to him. He's still breathing, unconscious, legs splintered open, bent back, bone exposed, blood oozing. No more ballet. Why am I here? Dinky down, crazy. To say, I'm sorry, as I place my hand, hien, gently, on his forehead. Just the moment I did that, he died. So,
you could tell.
Yeah. His gone. He's gone. His spirit splits. Didi Mao, go quickly. Vietnamese. Just like that. Gone. Dinky Dao. Did I give the okay? Where's my bullet? My ballet? They're all mine. He danced with grace, precision, and fluidity. I wondered about his ballerina back home.
Really, the poem wrote itself, it seems, in many ways.
Yeah.
And you chose to use the Vietnamese in the poem to just not to to kind of give him voice, it sounds like, in
Yeah.
a way, also.
In some ways, it's a hard confession,
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Before I read it at Clock Street Voice, I read it at the October Literary Festival. But
Mhm.
it's I did this, and I have to take ownership.
You asked
of
that question in the poem, did I give the signal, I think, is the line, because you were out front?
And I heard them. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then your troops were, or your other, the other soldiers were behind you, obviously.
Yeah. And it's 20-year-old guys, and we're both trained, when we encounter each other, we're both trained to kill each other, destroy each other.
Yeah.
And that was like, so I struggled with that so much, coming home.
Yeah. When you say each other, meaning the enemy, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were trained to destroy us, and
Right.
we were trained to destroy them.
Yeah, right.
That's what
Yeah.
combat is.
It's a utterly dehumanizing
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
I can't help but ask you, as a veteran and as someone who experienced war firsthand, what you might be feeling right now about the present situation in the world, where some politicians are flirting with the idea of war, and one in particular who hasn't had the same experience. What you would say as a witness and as a former soldier yourself? Well,
it's hard once again. Iraq was hard because I knew how much suffering and hardship that would cause, not just for the soldiers involved on both sides, but for their families. If they didn't come home, or they came home severely wounded, or they came home domestic violence, or so I knew, and I was like, oh, how could you do this?
Because they don't know.
They don't know. You're right. They don't know.
And how can you tell them in any other way than reading or writing a poem like this, right?
That's right.
That, as I just said, seems to have written itself.
I want to read to you a piece that you wrote.
Oh, really?
that speaks right to this moment for me.
Well, I'm flattered you found something.
What can you say to those outside who haven't read your poems, who find it hard to get the news from poetry, but die miserably every day for lack of what is found there? And that's what you just talked to. That's very profound when I read that.
Yeah. I'm borrowing from William Carlos Williams there, but it's a line that just continues to resonate. Yeah.
William Carlos Williams said it is difficult to get the news from poetry.
That's the same passage. That's right. Yeah.
And Ezra Pound said the news that stays news is poetry.
That's right. The news that stays news. Yeah.
And I like that, and that kind of informs my present writing, because I have a poem about climate change, because Mexico City is closed today.
It's closed today?
Is closed today. Mexico City is closed today.
Meaning, that's the name of the poem.
The whole city was shut down from one day. No one could go out because of the air pollution.
Oh.
Now this is relegated to kind of the back stages of mainstream news, but when I read it, I was like, how could this happen? If a city of 20 million people, and if it was L.A., it would be everywhere.
It actually happened in Beijing also.
Okay.
Last year at some point.
Can I read that one?
Sure.
Let's see. And again, my purpose in writing a poem for that story was, I asked people when I've read this, did you know about this? And no one raised their hand. But I always thought, okay, can I put it in a few words that would be accessible to a reader? And anyway, Mexico City closed today. Particulate matter, tiny black matter, scatter to block the sun. Delights and surprises shudder down. Wanderlust hungers for a taco. No one's around. Consciousness grabbed by catastrophe. Hard to dignify, sanctify, quantify. Air quality. Under siege. Mexico's dry season brush fires burn brush. Burnt brush ignites woodland's fiery blush. Seasonal rains dry. Pray to Tloc, the Aztec god of rain, for a sprinkle, a drizzle, a splash to torrent the blain. 100 fires a day. Ever-rising smoke blankets a haze. 20 million people share air in Mexico City. This morning it's sullied, climate's no pity. Soot congests and clogs a mariachi's horn. Border is closed, planes no longer airborne. Shutter the park, bat in the zoo, deadlocked soccer, baseball fields too. Children's sad playgrounds, void of laughter's yahoos. Black damp in flames, high ozone to the ground. Dark deepening chaos, wind-blown cinders surround. White dust masks turn sable as they filter black breath. Driving bands jam, avoid megadeath. NASA observes plumes on its Flambeau Twitter feed. Quick, call a rainmaker, these clouds need a seed. LA will be closed.
Wow. Wonderful. Powerful again.
Thanks.
Do you get the impression that your muse is writing these? I mean, this takes an interestingly different form. You're rhyming a lot in this poem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you talk about why you decided to rhyme and how the rhyme complements your idea here, your theme?
A lot of my poetry does rhyme. A friend of mine who was a poet once criticized that and said, you shouldn't write. So I started writing, more less rhyme.
Oh, you did.
But I still do, and I also am very alliterative in my writing. Mm-hmm. But I think it comes from hearing it and a lyrical cadence, almost musical. Yeah.
It's interesting. The first poem you read, which is I mentioned, it has a powerful quality of witness to it. Just has a kind of what I would call Vatic spareness to it, and it doesn't rhyme, as if you just want to communicate what was happening at that moment, as opposed to this poem that is written at somewhat of a distance and has a more lyrical quality to it, as you said. Yeah. Well, you've written a lot of plays. Let's turn to those too.
Sure.
Over the last several years, you've written a play about Van Gogh. Yeah. You've written a poem about the poet Robert Lowell. Mm-hmm. And I think you said you're working on a new one now.
Well, I'm considering a new one. Just today I had an idea for one.
Yeah, and these plays actually were produced.
Yeah.
And put on at the Hooker Dunham Theater, I believe.
Yeah.
And did very well. Received high acclaim from local critics.
Well, Jerry Levy wrote a very nice review in the letter to the editor in the Commons. That was very gracious.
Yeah. So to bring back these, or to write about these artists and poets from the not so recent past. I mean, Lowell died in '77, I think. Of course, Van Gogh back in the 19th century. So what's appealing to you about the drama of these poets' lives and what they had to say and show as an artist?
I briefly mentioned Van Gogh. In the mid-'70s, after I came back from Vietnam, I was working on trail crew in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I had a trail foreman, Gene, who was a retired highway motorcycle cop, kind of gruff, chain smoke cigarettes kind of guy. But he kept calling me Van Gogh. And I had a red beard
you do
and
look a little
bit
of
a resemblance.
I'm sure you've heard that.
And yeah. So, but I didn't know who Van Gogh was at that point in my...
Yeah.
So one day I said, why are you calling this? He said, well, come down to my cabin one day for dinner. And I go down and meet his wife and have dinner, and I look around the cabin, and there's all these beautiful, beautiful watercolors, and Gene had painted them.
Oh.
Landscape watercolor, and so judge a book by its cover. I mean, I would not suspect him of being an artist. And then he told me about Van Gogh.
Wow.
And then I had a fascination with him, and
was it his artwork, his paintings that
his whole life, his life story. I went to France on my honeymoon in '89, and went to Auvers where he died. So
you became fascinated.
I did, and a book came out in 2011 called Van Gogh: The Life, which their main premise of the book was that he didn't commit suicide.
I've read this. Read this. Yeah,
and it was a compelling book. And that's what I wrote the play from that book.
There's several theories. I mean, obviously he suffered some extreme psychological trauma.
Yeah.
But now they're thinking that it was a disease that he suffered from rather than depression. I mean, depression is a disease as well, but that there was some endogenous malady that he suffered from. They were actually ran in the family, and I can't remember the name of it, but at any rate, I think there's a lot of mythology that grew up around his end in particular.
I learned this book from a 60 Minutes show, and it's the premise. They had these two guys who were wonderful writers, and they were compelling researchers, and they made me believe that this was a possibility.
Yeah. Was there something about? Well, obviously there was something about his work in particular that struck you.
Yeah, I did find it very beautiful.
As opposed to others, though, Gogh or Matisse,
just,
or there's something about him in particular.
Yeah, just the color and the vibrancy of the work. In order to prep for the play, I was lucky to find an artist, Heidi Lorenz, who just happened to be teaching a plein air class over in Goshen, New Hampshire. And I joined the class, and they were all landscape artists, pros, really take months to do. And I was doing like a painting per class. I was the class clown. Yeah. But I was trying to do Van Gogh paintings, and I got into it because I wanted to feel what that was like. He painted very quickly.
Have you become a painter?
Not really, no.
No? Okay.
I mean, if you've done a painting, I guess you are,
Yeah, right. And Lowell. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Robert Lowell.
Say a few words about Lowell.
A great book by Kay Redfield Jamison, wonderful writer. It's called "Setting the River on Fire," and it's on the life of Robert Lowell. And Kay Redfield Jamison is.
Is she the psychiatrist?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
She's one of the top psychiatrists in the country.
Right.
Also manic depressive.
Right.
So she
had
totally
a
owns this
particular interest
from inside.
Right.
And it writes beautifully. And it just seemed like, wow, this is a natural. And I wanted the title "Setting the River on Fire," which is amazing. Yeah. But I couldn't use it because hers. Right. But, so I thought, how about "Running on Top of the Water"?
Oh.
Because he. When he was manic, sometimes he thought he was Napoleon. He thought he was Jesus. Right. And he does become Napoleon in my play. Yeah,
we should just explain that Robert Lowell was one of the great poets of the 20th century from Boston. He unfortunately suffered from manic depression.
That's right.
And died in 1977, returning to his wife, Elizabeth Hardwick, or his former wife, in a taxi cab of a heart attack. Now, I'm just noticing that you are drawn to two figures, Van Gogh and also Lowell, who really experienced extreme psychological states.
And so have I.
And so is there something about...
So it is a natural. I suffered a lot of depression when I first came home from Vietnam.
You mentioned PTSD. If you suffered
PTSD, post-traumatic after trauma stress. And, I've been diagnosed with mania. So,
This was after you got back? I mean...
Yeah, this was way back in, I mean, not
Yeah.
more recent, in the late 90s. And, you know, we have labels and, you know, manic depressive illness. People went away from that and they kind of go to bipolar disorder, which, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So, but, you know, I did struggle with mania. I struggled with deep depression and post-traumatic stress, where I thought I was back in Vietnam.
Oh.
And I ended up
in
the VA hospital in Northampton for 3 months, and my life kind of fell apart.
But you were treated pretty successfully, it sounds like.
Well, again, it took a while to piece that back together.
Yeah.
You know, I lost my job at Landmark. I lost my apartment, girlfriend. You know, all this, but again, I had family and who helped me tremendously to come back, and I was depressed for 2 years, and that's when I actually started writing poetry.
I was just going to ask, the writing must have played a key role
and that's when
in helping you. Did
Ambiance Ballet came out in 2007, when, you know, and I kind of had my fell apart in 2006.
So did your therapist encourage you to write, or
No.
you just did it? Because
No, I just did it.
it's an old assignment that therapists often give.
Yeah.
I mean, Anne Sexton was told to start writing when she was the poet. So, but you just felt inspired.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was more take these meds, you know, try these.
Yeah.
And not really a therapeutic.
There must have been great.
Milieu.
You must have experienced some great exhilaration when you discover the power of writing.
Yes.
It's kind of. It sounds like it almost saved your life in some ways. Am I being hyperbolic in saying that?
I'd like to read one. I wrote 2 short poems, but I'll just read one.
Maybe we could even close with these, if you don't mind.
This one is Agent Orange. This is about Vietnam. And this is when I came back from Vietnam, I wrote this. But I didn't write anything after this one for like 30 years.
Wow.
So
this is 70-something?
Yeah, I came back in 71.
Yeah.
So I probably wrote this in 72. Agent Orange. Secret Agent Orange has been here, low crawling past newly splintered bodies, flying high amidst the apex of the canopy, descending noir over all you see. Black acrid smoke pervades the air. Death in one of its most sinister masks drips through the defoliated jungle. Aluminum soap jellies engulfing each one-screen leaf, smothering all synthesis in its pallid cloak. Now, I walked for 2 weeks through defoliated jungle.
I mean, vets are still experiencing the side effects, and more than that from Agent Orange.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that I didn't have any cancers or birth defects or anything like that. The worst I got was very, very bad acne, in my face and back.
I mean, it doesn't break down in the environment, does it?
It burns everything to ash.
But I mean, it stays in
that's right. Yeah.
in the ground.
Yeah, I don't know about its half-lives,
Right.
but I'm sure the people of Vietnam have suffered with that for today.
Now this is very lyrical also.
Did
the
you
language.
find it lyrical?
Yeah. And you said there was one other that you wrote?
All right, this is Friends Once. This is about joining the Army.
Oh, good.
And then Vietnam.
I was going to ask you, why did you join the Army?
Well, I
you
got
had
drafted.
No choice. You got drafted.
I got
That's
drafted.
right. Okay.
Okay. Friends Once. Make your buddy smile. Now, they would say that because they would want you to tighten up the ranks. And it's kind of a, what do they call it? Anyway, make your buddy smile. Walk back up to my point. Gave each other credence as we ran through the jungle. Wait a minute vines made us pause. Red ants made us dance. Leeches with lanceolated bodies drained our life's blood. Jungle rot from the fungi, silently sidestepping the punji, till the freedom bird arrived at Benoit to take us back to the world.
Take us back to the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that was our expression,
Yeah, that's your...
When back in the world, I'm going to get, the
Yeah.
fastest car, the prettiest girl. And
Because you're just not in the world here in Vietnam. You've just been taken away to some horrific place.
But it was also beautiful, very beautiful. The jungle was very beautiful.
I know. It's one of the most beautiful
so there was
countries in the
that
world.
aspect of it. Days when you didn't confront the enemy, it was a very, this jungle was beauty.
The combination of the horror and the beauty must have been overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what book I read on the way over? And we went to Anchorage, Alaska, and in the terminal there was one of these racks of books, and I spun it. And it was Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. Oh, yeah. And I read that on the plane on the way to Vietnam. Right. I didn't have any idea what I was reading, but it was... Yeah. You know it?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's a famous anti-war novel. Mm-hmm. Dalton Trumbo was one of the communists, accused of being communist in the theater. And but it's about a soldier who was horribly wounded, but still alive.
Well, Charles, it's been wonderful talking to you. And I wish we could talk for hours, but unfortunately we can't. And I hope people will go see your new plays when they come out, and if you publish a book, to read it, and I hope you keep writing.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to think about how do you publish a book. And, but
I'll help you figure out a way. I'll try to give you some suggestions.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Charles.